So, I've seen over the years quite a few people who bought a business and then they perhaps have struggled because they didn't realise, how complex or what's involved in running a business. So I think part of if you're, looking to buy a business for the first time, you need to do a lot of work around planning post-acquisition. So you've got a really good plan on how you're going to run it, how you're going to kind of make sure there's cash flow coming in and making sure it's a solid business, because I think that's where, unfortunately, a lot of new buyers fail, because they spend all the time looking at different opportunities to buy, but don't really then sort of look at the what's it like post-acquisition. And I think that's where the danger is for them.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the businessesforsale.com podcast. In today's episode, we're speaking to a pair of experienced business brokers. We've got Matthew Trinder from Sovereign Business Transfer and Simon Norton from Bristol Business Brokers. So their job is to help business buyers and sellers get deals over the line. And they've done this for hundreds, if not thousands of deals in their many years of experience. And today they're going to share some tips, advice, and success stories with our viewers. We're going to hear about what businesses are thriving in 2026, mistakes that buyers often make, and we'll hear some success stories, maybe even some horror stories too. So that should give you an idea of what you should and shouldn't do in the world of acquisitions. Hi, gentlemen. Thank you for coming in today. How are you doing?
Very well, thanks. Yourself?
Yep. Great to have you. I guess I'll launch into a question which is a bit of an obvious question. I think you probably will get this quite a few times if you've been to some exhibitions, which I know you both have. But it's one of the first questions that buyers will ask us as well, and I'm sure they ask you as well. So, what industries do you currently think are some of the businesses that are on the rise, industries that are looking successful at the moment, or industries that buyers should be considering or researching at the moment? Matthew, if you want to start.
Yeah, I thought you might start with me first of all. Sure, cheers. Industries that are doing well at the moment, engineering industries are doing well. Printing industries, we found, we've just got a deal going through with one of those at the moment. Industries that, again, some people might say are struggling at the moment, but I always see it as an opportunity, is the health and, the retail industry, for example, hospitality. I say health and fitness is always good, but hospitality doing well for us.
Okay, and how about you, Simon?
Manufacturing, very similar, actually. I've got two metal fabrication businesses at the moment, which I took on in September, and we're now under offer. They seem to be doing it's a very hot sector. HVAC and air conditioning seems to be selling very well at the moment. And also marketing. I always get a lot of interest in marketing companies because I think quite often there's buyers that have got multiple businesses that they've bought. So, a marketing company is a great bolt-on for a group of businesses that they've bought. So that's they sell particularly well.
Do you think it's kind of because I feel like we're in a period now where a lot has changed, a lot of things are changing, and I guess AI is shaking everything up as well. Do you think these are just things that will always be successful, always be relevant?
Certainly the manufacturing, yes. I've got buyers that come through to me and they're like, I want to buy a business that's not affected by China, AI, kind of the key, or Amazon. So they're almost like boring businesses that got years of history, sustainable profits, and they're the ones that seem to be appealing to buyers right now.
Yeah, and do you think that applies to some of the ones you mentioned as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what we're finding in our particular sectors are that, especially like in engineering and manufacturing, again, that they're buying client base. So they're looking at a particular sector and they're looking to effectively take on client base, to, in other words, to boost their revenue and profitability, rather than trying to go out and generate interest and buyers and, clients and that sort of thing. So definitely there seems to be, like I said, then more people in the industry that are buying other businesses to complement their current portfolio.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that, because actually organic growth can be quite hard. So, for companies to really grow, if they get a bolt-on acquisition in the same sector, that gives them, instant sort of turnover and profit upside. But more importantly, it's really difficult to get good people now, employ good people. So actually, by buying a business, if you bolt it onto yours, you can potentially get a good, scope of new people that can work, within the group.
Yeah, it's very true. We often talk about at Businesses for Sale that if you're buying a business, the reason you want to do that is because you're skipping all the setup phase. You're going straight from 0 to 50%. But what you're describing is kind of going from 50% to 75 or 100%.
Yeah.
It's like taking that next step of growth.
Exactly.
But doing it in a way that is already kind of laid out for you, isn't it?
Yeah. And if you're buying a business that's got a good track record of clients and profits, and they've been around for a long time, it's a pretty safe acquisition.
Yeah. Do you think that kind of applies across all industries? Is that marketing something you can kind of bolt on to not necessarily every business?
Well, marketing is a slightly different sector because although I mentioned earlier, they are very appealing to buyers. Because of AI, there was a little bit of nervousness at the moment because they're sort of saying, well, how is AI going to affect, sort of content writing? So that is a little bit different, but they still seem to be kind of selling though.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I've kind of contended with a bit as well. It's definitely changing everything up. But I guess on the flip side, are there any businesses that right now you would advise people avoid, stay away from entirely?
I'll take that one. No, I think as a business broker or advisor, our job is to take any business to market, package it up as effectively as we can to make it appealing to any buyer. As I said right at the start of the podcast, the hospitality industry has been hit really, really hard with running costs of businesses, minimum wage increases, everything. However, there is always opportunity for a potential buyer. They're always looking at key locations, high footfall areas. So no, I mean, steer clear of any industry. No, I'll say no. What about you, Simon? Yeah.
Well, I'm actually the opposite. Actually, I do steer clear of retail and hospitality, not because I don't think it's a bad sector, but I personally like to work with the buyers I've got in my database. So, for example, with marketing, I've got 100 buyers right now that I can go out to. But with retail and hospitality, I've got no buyers. So, if a seller comes to me, I'm always very transparent and say, look, I'm probably not the right broker because I don't really have buyers in your sector. But other ones I've got plenty of buyers.
It's a tricky one.
That's really interesting, Sam. I mean, you can do business. Yeah, we should. I've got thousands of people looking for hospitality. We can do that. No problem.
I suppose it's a case of it's all being shaken up, especially in hospitality. But if wherever someone is struggling, there's an opportunity for someone else, isn't there? And people who good entrepreneurs will be able to spot those opportunities and separate them from just things that look appealing. So if there was, I guess, just keeping on, things that first-time buyers maybe would like to know, because I think we'll probably have quite a few first-time buyers watching this. Are there any lessons that you think you would teach to a first-time business buyer? Things that people often wish they'd known that you wish you would pass on to a first-time business buyer?
Yeah, do you want me to start? There's a few actually. I think firstly, a buyer needs to understand the transaction from both sides of the table. Yeah. So quite often buyers come in and they're trying to buy a business with either all debt and trying to leverage the business, but they've got to put themselves in the shoes of the seller to say, is that a good deal for the seller if 100% of the deal is going to be leveraged, which quite often new buyers try that approach. Another thing as well, that if they're looking to borrow money, the financial market has changed. So a few years ago, lenders were a lot more willing to lend to sort of just buyers of any businesses. Now they like to see credibility. So if a buyer's coming in and wants to buy a commercial cleaning business, they want to see that buyer has some knowledge or some experience in that sector to lend. So I've seen there's a real change there. So I think they need to be aware that if you've got a skill set in a particular sector, that would be helpful. They're kind of the key points for me.
Okay, so people should leverage the skills they've already got instead of maybe a complete pivot into something different. Yeah. Probably in the current economy, it's a bit of a safer bet.
And the other thing I was just remembered actually is buying a business is easy. That's the easy part. Actually running a business, once you bought the business, is the hard part. Yeah. So, I've seen over the years quite a few people who bought business and then they perhaps have struggled because they didn't realise, how complex or what's involved in running a business. So I think part of if you're looking to buy a business for the first time, you need to do a lot of work around planning post-acquisition. So you've got a really good plan on how you're going to run it, how you're going to kind of make sure there's cash flow coming in and making sure it's a solid business, because I think that's where, unfortunately, a lot of new buyers fail because they spend all the time looking at different opportunities to buy, but don't really then sort of look at what's it like post-acquisition. And I think that's where, the danger is for them.
Yeah. Sorry, and I think, buying a business is really exciting. Researching the business that you're really interested in, it's amazing. It's the best thing you're ever going to do. I would always say to buyers, go on the platforms, visit businessesforsale.com, go and find 10 businesses that interest you, that you're interested in acquiring, see the different values and turnover and profitability. Do as much research as you can. If anything, take advice from an accountant. Yes, it may cost you a few pounds to go and get a formal business plan put together, but at least then you can do your cash flow, whether it's for 6 months, 12 months, 24 months. Because a lot of new business buyers, depending on size, will literally go in and run out of money. They don't realise they need cash flow to run a business. It might be great buying a business for 100 grand, 50 grand, whatever, but then you need working capital. And a lot of buyers just don't understand this. So I think a lot of research, due diligence, get professional advice, speak to brokers like Simon and I. We'll find and source and locate businesses that may not even be on the market at the moment. We can actually go and reach out within the marketplace. But I think, as I've always said, just get sound professional advice, and that's the key to acquiring.
We were speaking earlier, weren't we, over lunch, that some people kind of have this this dream of like a very hands-off business that you just put the money in and then it just slowly increases. Doesn't really work that way in real life, does it? Unless maybe you buy a vending machine business and you just put it in a hallway somewhere. Realistically, you're buying a job for yourself in some ways, but you're buying the security as well as that, which is why it's,
Unless you can buy a business that's got sort of profits around $500,000 a year and has already got an existing management team. If you can buy a business that's got, like an operations director or even an MD that's going to stay, that means that you can run the business from afar. But if you're buying a business with, say, 200,000 or less profit a year, the reality is, as a buyer, you're going to have to be hands-on and run that business, probably more so than you think.
And then, as well as kind of lessons that buyers can learn, are there any common mistakes that you see first-time buyers specifically make?
I mean, first-time buyers, when you set up a business or you buy an existing business, you hope when you're buying an existing business that a lot of the mistakes have already been made and there's a footprint or a plan for you to run that business effectively once post-completion. As a business owner, you're literally moving, the goalposts move day in, day out. Again, you need to understand that business doesn't just come in through the front door. You're not always going to have reams of money going through your till or being put into your bank. So it's forecasting more than anything, but just having a good understanding of the industry, really. Being on top of things, I'd always say to business buyers, cash flow, making sure your invoices are paid. A lot of people do the work, send out the invoice, and then forget to chase it. It's the basic of running a business, cash flow. So.
Yeah, it's true. I think you want the other people that you've bought the business from to have already made the mistakes, and then ideally, you can learn some lessons from that.
And also, as a new buyer, if you don't have the skills, then employ people who can. So maybe get a coach that can help you to manage your kind of journey as a business owner. So I've seen that. I've had buyers that have done that and employed to navigate through the first couple of years. So that's helped. Or bring in key people. So I sold another business where, he wasn't particularly strong, the buyer, on the financial, but he bought an interim, FD in for a period just to help him to really kind of look at how to restructure the business.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of about knowing your own strengths and weaknesses,
exactly,
and your experience and being able to go from there.
I mean, just one thing that we do at Sovereign is that we can actually act as a consultant for people looking to buy businesses. So they can come to us. And we'll talk them through the process from start to finish and guide them through that. So those sort of services, I know Simon offers it as well. So we can basically assist buyers as well as helping people to sell their businesses. So it's a two-pronged approach, really.
What are some of the most common things people ask you when they kind of come to that service? What are some of the things they want help with the most?
So usually, I'll give you a typical example. We were acting on a sale of this was a sale actually, this one. They were looking to sell their printing business. They had a buyer already in place, but they wanted us to manage it through effectively for them. A, make sure that they were getting the right amount of money for their business, and B, making sure the due diligence process that was in place was actually fair, because the buyers will ask literally the ins and outs and everything. And you have to be very careful when you're selling your business that you don't give all of your secrets away, if I can put it that way. So our job there on that particular transaction was very much protect the seller and make sure that the deal moved through to transaction, which was also working with the solicitors as well, and also the landlords, because obviously there were leases in place.
Yeah, and I suppose it's another important part of business broking is that you're somewhere in the middle between the buyer and the seller, and you're working with both of them. How do you kind of find the balance? How do you know when to sort of pull back and let them discuss things.
Yeah,
versus
that's a
jump
good
in?
point. I always like to see myself as if I'm representing my client who's the seller, you've got to really understand the transaction from both sides of the table. So you really need to understand, for a deal to complete, both parties have got to feel that the risk is right for both. It's a fair risk for both parties. So really the challenge of being a broker is to kind of understand what both parties are trying to achieve from this, the motivations behind the sale. And if you can do that, then actually you can generally navigate any issues.
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well. And then obviously once you've agreed the fundamentals of the deal, it then goes over to the legal solicitor stage. And it's then up for the solicitors to then put the deal into a legal format that all parties can then sign, agree to, and then the deal can complete. Yeah. I mean, there are, deals that can be structured that solicitors may not advise is the best deal on the table. However, if the client is looking to sell their business and they're happy with the terms that have been agreed, then it's a different option, isn't it, at the end of the day?
I'd like to kind of shift a little bit to talking about some of the businesses that you guys have worked with and kind of your day-to-day dealings. Like, what would you say is the strangest business you've ever brokered? You were talking a little bit earlier today about flight simulation business.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if some of these you might not be able to talk about in detail, so obviously don't mention anything top secret. But if you can share with us, maybe without names.
Yeah, I mean, that is quite an unusual one. Goes against the run of the mill of what we normally do. However, so this particular business is a flight simulation business. It basically allows pilots to go and do their training. This particular centre is allowed to also, it's approved by the CAA, Civil Aviation Authority, and they can actually do courses that allow pilots to qualify for effectively, to fly the aircraft, to the Airbus, etc. So that's a really unusual one, to be honest with you. But again, just looking at the stats, because behind businessesforsale.com, you can also see the number of inquiries that have come through on there. And there's an awful lot of inquiries that are coming through. So that's a good positive one in a niche market.
I suppose the stranger it is, the more appealing it is to kind of want to learn a bit more and you get sort of intrigued, don't you? Yeah. Simon, how about you? What would you say?
Yeah, a couple actually. A few years ago, I sold a wild swimming event business. So they put on for people that swim like 10 kilometres, out in the sea or in the river. But they have like 3 or 4 events every year. And when I originally took that on, I thought, that's going to be quite tricky to find. But actually, sometimes the more niche it is, actually, the easier it is to find buyers. And we found buyers and sort of transacted that within 9 months. And then I took on last year. Someone came to me and they had a commercial embroidery business. And my initial reaction was like, I'm not sure if I'm going to find buyers for that sector. They do like workwear, but they embroidered it in-house. And again, went to the market through Businesses for Sale, and I was very surprised how many leads I had. And that was actually a very quick transaction. We did that in about 4 months.
4 months. Wow.
Yeah. So sometimes I used to be a bit put off by sort of the really niche, but actually I think what that's taught me is actually sometimes if it's a niche market, there will be buyers out there. Might not be the volume of buyers, but you'll have serious buyers who are looking.
And it kind of increases the level of discoverability as well. If the stranger it is, the more it's going to stand out against 100 cafes or laundromats, as effective as they often are. But have you ever tried the wild swimming yourself, or was that just a strictly...
Didn't appeal to me at all, no, I've got to be honest.
I don't think it's something I don't think I'd be very good at that.
No, especially 10 kilometres, I think one of them was.
Yeah, cold swimming, cold showers, can't do that. I think some people advocate for it, but not sure if it would be one for me. So similar to your embroidery business that you weren't sure if it would sell, but then it was, quite successful in terms of leads. Are there any businesses that are kind of the opposite of that you maybe thought would fly off the shelves and then were a little bit harder to move?
Yeah, I've got one right now, actually. So I took on a drainage and plumbing business. Fantastic business, really well structured, very good profit. Had lots of interest, but just can't seem to find the right buyers to get a deal agreed. And I must admit, when I took that on, because I sell quite a lot in the facility management, the FM sector, of which this sort of fits quite nicely. So I thought I would have, lots of interest. Well, I've had 69 buyer leads for it, but we just can't seem to find a deal that works for all parties. So yeah, I was surprised actually that hasn't sold yet.
There's some kind of joke that's forming in my head about blockage in the pipeline, deal pipeline.
Deal pipeline.
You can finish the joke yourselves. Yeah. And how about you, Matthew?
Yeah, I mean, I've got one again. I've got one at the moment, which hand on heart, I really thought would sell, and it's a garage, a very profitable garage, in Leeds city centre. I've approached all the major players within the industry, and they've come back and said because it's not on a main road and highly visible location, we don't want it. Which is very strange, really. But again, from my point of view, I'm trying to explain to them that it's got off-road parking. It's immaculately presented. It's a good, profitable business. I just can't get a buyer for it at the moment. But it's not for the want of trying. But again, somebody will come through, I'm sure. But for my database at the moment, we are sort of like struggling on that one slightly. But again, I always say never. So I could get a phone call this afternoon from the office and they tell me that a buyer's been found, or you just don't know.
Have you kind of noticed a change in that sense of more people or less people buying to kind of grow through acquisition versus people who are already in that same industry or trade or private sellers?
I've seen in the last few years post-COVID, I've seen a big trend in buyers that have been perhaps on a course. Perhaps they used to be in property development and that's got harder. So they're now looking to buy businesses. So they go on these courses and come through and they're looking to buy businesses. So there's been quite a trend in those. But quite often they struggle to have access to finance. So they're not always the best buyers, but they sometimes, they do buy businesses. But that's been a trend I've seen.
Interesting. So people who maybe post-COVID kind of wanted to build something for themselves and then did a course and kind of went to go buy.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I think those sort of buyers, that once they've bought a business and they can sort of, they've got the credibility of buying a business and then running it for a while, it does help them with further acquisitions. I think if they're buying one for the first time, it's all that credibility, which I think sometimes the sellers just get a little bit nervous of if they've got no experience of actually running a business or any particular experience in their sector. It does make it harder for them to sell.
And I suppose if that's a first-time experience, people maybe haven't gone through the process before, things might be more likely to kind of collapse at the last minute or, fall through. You mentioned earlier, if you are able to speak about it or would like to speak about it, that you had a deal that kind of fell apart quite recently, just sort of last minute.
Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve, yeah. And no, it's not a good time to be in your line of work, I suppose, is it? December must be quite quiet with people falling off for Christmas, and then suddenly in January everybody wants to buy a business and change their life. But can you speak a bit more about that?
Yeah,
deal?
so I mean that deal I worked on for almost best part of a year actually, and in the end really it came down to one point, which was kind of an HR related issue, and this is when the lawyers on both sides were kind of going back and forth. And we really tried hard to overcome this one point, but both parties felt there was too much risk involved, and they just would not agree on. Neither party would concede on this one point. So literally, it collapsed because of one point on an HR policy, and that was really frustrating. But I'll find another buyer for them. But it was just frustrating that it collapsed just before Christmas.
Yeah, that as a business broker, you can work on deals for 12 months, even longer, because of the due diligence that takes place. I think one thing that we try and do to mitigate a loss like that is that I have basically a department that purely specialises in transactions. So we work very much as a pinball between buyer, seller, landlord and the solicitors. So the way that we try and stop any deal from falling down, and obviously they do unfortunately fall down for certain points, is that we actually contact all parties twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's our days. So solicitors was always contacted. Have you received the information from the other side? No. Right. What is it you're waiting for? Then we go back the other way. And we literally just keep everybody informed. So touch wood, we lose very few deals. The ones that we do lose are just basically because of it's illegal. I'll say technicality because everything should be able to be overcome. But that they don't tend to fall down with us. And I think the credit to my staff is that they do maintain communication between all parties. And it just stops basically any deal really from falling down.
I do the same actually. Once you got the head of terms signed, I set up a weekly call with the buyer and seller, not with the solicitors, just buyer and seller. So we have a three-way call, and we just get out on the table everything like where are we with the SPA, where are we with the sort of the finance, and So everyone's clear. And what that does is if there are any blockages, before the lawyers get involved, we can actually kind of clear those away. So then they can just both go back to their respective lawyers to say, look, we've had a conversation and this is what we're going to do. So that works very well because a deal, it's all about the momentum. As soon as you lose the momentum, then quite often that's when you can sort of have the deal fail. So, by keeping like weekly regular contact, it keeps everybody on track.
And I guess that momentum is a bit killed over Christmas quite often.
Yeah, generally sort of mid-December till the sort of second week in January, everything slows down. So,
And then New Year, everybody wants to, leave their job and start a new business and buy something. And, it must be busy for you guys now, but I think we appreciate you coming down. How do you kind of... it must be quite frustrating if, deals can fall apart after you've worked on them for a whole year. How do you kind of... handle the challenge of that in a way, or just the day-to-day?
Well, that's just the nature of being in the broking sector. Like I gave an example earlier. I've got a business I'm selling now, and I've had 69 buyer leads. So that's a lot of no's that you have to get through. So it's just you kind of get used to it, and you're kind of when the deal collapses, it's frustrating for a few days. But then I'm really thinking, right, well, I've spoken to somebody else, and who else could I bring in? So you're always thinking, right. If this doesn't, and you kind of also have a couple up your sleeve just in case that does happen. So I'm with that one in particular. I'm now back in touch with a couple of others that were in the process, and we can see if we can sort of still structure a deal for my client. So you just get used to it. As in terms of you have to. It's a lot of effort that goes in to kind of get the results that we see.
Yeah, and I think I'll echo what you said there as well. I've been selling businesses since 2005. I set up Sovereign in 2008. The way that we work very much is process, and it's just ticking boxes, basically, making sure that everybody's in line. And like you said, creating that momentum. As long as you keep the momentum going, the deal should complete.
Yeah.
It's just a case of just getting all the ducks in a row and making sure that everybody's singing off the same hymn sheet. But when the deals do fall down, I go for a long walk. I think about, all the other deals, hopefully, that are going to come through. But it's just the nature of the beast, unfortunately. You do lose deals. And when they do fall down, don't forget, it's not just us that lose our commission, it's the client as well. They've got future plans. They might have booked a long holiday and their retirement and everything else. So,
must be one of those where, you get 50 no's, but that one yes makes it all worth all the work that you've done. Yeah. So it must be a bit of kind of just ploughing on and being resilient.
Yeah, one thing
you need to be very resilient.
Yeah, one thing I would say is right at the start, when we're representing a client, my pitch very much is we'll make sure that anybody that comes to see you is in a financial position to move forward. That's whether they're a cash buyer or whether they need funding. And we get to the point whereby anybody that's sat in front of our clients, our client knows more about them as much as they need to know with regards to making sure that they are in a position to buy. They've got experience, they've either got funding in place already, or if they haven't, we'll put them in touch with one of our funding partners who will give us a very clear indication of whether they are actually in a position to buy.
Yeah.
One thing I probably shouldn't say is that everybody's a millionaire out there, and they've always got loads of money, haven't they? Until you start asking the questions and delving a little bit deeper. So it's just pre-qualification of the buyer to make sure that they are in a position to buy.
And another topic or another kind of aspect where brokers can add a lot of value versus trying to go through the whole deal yourself is in that kind of negotiation stage. So one thing I was kind of curious to ask you guys was, do you have any negotiation tactics that you kind of use or that you could share with buyers, or any tales or tips from the negotiation table?
Well, like I said earlier, you need to understand the transaction and what motivates both parties. So I wouldn't say sort of necessarily negotiate techniques, but like I say, if you understand, what the objective is for both parties, the skill really of a broker is to try and make sure that both people, the buyer and seller, feel like it's a good deal for them. So you kind of, by understanding their motivations, you can sort of come up with generally a deal that sort of works. Also, in terms of something I discovered last year, actually, which does help sellers, but also in the negotiation process, is when somebody sells a business, they want to make sure that they get 100% of the money that's owed to them, right? Now, generally, deals are structured in many ways, but there's an element of a day one payment, and then there's an element of deferred payment in most cases. So what I discovered last year is that you can take out, or the seller can take out an insurance policy It's called deferred insurance. That means that for that pot of money that's deferred, they can pay an amount of money to insure that amount. So that just takes away the risk then of if the buyer defaults on their payments or goes bankrupt, that pot of money that's been insured will be paid to the seller. So that's a really good technique to help with the negotiation in terms of kind of making, because obviously the seller is kind of nervous that they just want to make sure that they get everything. And by sort of using that into the process, that really does help. Now, generally, the sellers will pay for that, but potentially a buyer, could put that into their offer. So if they said, right, we want to give you 100% confidence that we're credible buyers and we're going to buy this business, we would even pay that amount to ensure, we'd pay for that as part of our deal structure, and then suddenly you're taking away that whole argument of the risk for the seller.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And I also wanted to ask you guys a little bit about kind of the state of the industry or broking and entrepreneurialism in general, a little bit in the UK as well. Are you seeing more sellers of sort of distressed businesses or lifestyle sellers or people who are, like growth exit sellers? How do you kind of see the landscape changing at the moment? And do you think buyers have a different approach depending on reasons people are selling? Or
yeah, I think the industry post-COVID, I don't think it's actually really recovered since COVID, if I'm being really honest with you. I think a lot of businesses are highly leveraged. They've either got loans or they're still paying back their COVID loan. So they're quite heavily geared. I think the types of people that are selling, they've maybe coming to the end of their working career and they're looking to cash in, if I can put it that way. Or you've got buyers, like Simon said before, that are looking to take market share and they're looking to buy the clients in. That's the sort of buyers that we've got, and sellers. And from a seller's or buyer's point of view, there are actually less buyers out there, I'm finding, at the moment, but the number of buyers are actually better. The quality of the buyer is far better. There's not as many people just thinking, oh, it's quite, let's have a look at that business. There's actually genuine buyers out there at the moment who actually have funds in place.
do you think that's COVID has kind of weaned off some of the dreamers? Maybe?
I think it's
kind of.
I think it's a couple of things really. I think yes, in answer to your question, yes, it has. But I also think the brokers now are a lot smarter. In the fact is they don't want to be chasing 70 inquiries and 68 of them are got no money. They'll rather chase the ones that actually have the money by pre-qualification and really narrow down and work hard on those particular buyers. Really.
Yeah, I suppose it can maybe be appealing to go for, quantity over quality, but that's not what anybody wants, is it? And it's the same with a lot of things as well. I think in, marketing, if you've hit the right people, then that's obviously always going to be more effective than hitting a larger number of people.
Only takes one person, doesn't it, to buy a business? Yeah. That's all you need.
The trends I've seen this year actually it's been an interesting year, I suppose, with the change of government 18 months or so ago. Some of the policies, the economic policies, have had an impact on potentially on the sellers. They've been almost, especially with the budget that was out in November, there was probably a period of 4 or 5 months where people were like, well, I'm thinking of selling, but I'm not sure if this is the right time. I'm going to wait to see what happens, because it was almost like prolonged, the whole budget announcement. That had an impact on the market, just on confidence. I think people like to sell when they think it's a good time to sell. And I think that had an impact on the market. Obviously, we've got the sort of tax rise going up on the disposal of businesses as well. It's going from 14 to 18% in April. So that's affected a number of sellers. Also, I've seen people that are selling their business and they want to leave the country. I've got one moment's looking to move to Dubai. I've got another one which is really interesting. They're looking to sell and move to Panama, which I thought was quite strange. But they went on a cruise. They absolutely love the place. It's tax free if you've got a certain amount in the bank, and they just see that as they want to get out of the country and sell the business and move there. So there's a bit of a trend of sort of people wanting to leave. Talking about entrepreneurs, they want to kind of leave the UK and move to different environments.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us, guys. We really appreciate your lending your experience
Pleasure.
And your success stories, horror stories. Hopefully, our viewers can get some useful tips and advice out of it. And thank you so much.